Trump gives 1 month to stop the war in Ukraine. Meanwhile, Moscow is playing for time. Kyiv prepares for a three-way summit. The US promises security guarantees. Moscow pretends to listen, but fills up weapons and issues ultimatums. Diplomacy marched alongside missile strikes. Hungary blocks EU funding for Ukraine and threatens an energy crisis via the Druzhba pipeline. Brussels searches for a compromise. Kyiv can't run out of cash, and Orban must save face before elections. And Trump's new tariffs hit Ukrainian experts hard. Can diplomacy, sanctions, and negotiations actually change the war? Watch the full episode for the answers. US President Donald Trump has called to end the war in Ukraine within a month. Trump made a remark on a phone call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on February 25th. Axios reports citing the Ukrainian leader and two other informed sources. The phone call between Trump and Zelensky on February 25th was reportedly friendly and positive. Zelensky thanked the US president for his support and highlighted America's key role in pressuring the Kremlin to end the war. Trump said the conflict has gone on too long and expressed hope it could be resolved within a month. He also confirmed the US is ready to offer Ukraine significant security guarantees as a part of a potential peace deal with Russia. US officials Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner joined the discussion after the call. Zelensky shared details of the key points covered.
We discussed the issues that our representatives will address tomorrow in Geneva during the bilateral meeting, as well as preparations for the next full-format trilateral talks at the very beginning of March. We expect these meetings to pave the way for negotiations at the leaders' level. President Trump supports this sequence of steps. Only through this approach can all complex and sensitive issues be resolved and the war finally brought to an end.
Meanwhile, the Kremlin sees no point in a meeting between Putin and Zelensky. The Russian presidential spokesperson said Ukraine's statements don't even require analysis. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov added that in the light of Zelensky's recent remarks, it's worth questioning whether a meeting with dictator Putin makes any sense, Russian media report.
Regarding a possible meeting between Putin and Zelensky, for now, it is enough to recall the Ukrainian president's latest statements. What Ukraine will not accept, what it will not compromise on, and what it plans to do next. There is no need for in-depth analysis. It's enough to ask whether a top-level meeting makes sense at all if Kyiv continues to maintain this stance.
Despite ongoing Russian attacks on Ukrainian cities, US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff remains optimistic about the peace process. He said that positive developments could occur in the coming weeks, with proposals he and Jared Kushner have put forward potentially bringing Ukraine and Russia closer together and even paving the way for a Zelensky-Putin summit. A trilateral meeting with US President Donald Trump could also be possible. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky declared victory for Ukraine. He told Fox News that Russia has failed to change Kyiv's course, capture the country, or remove its flag, marking a Ukrainian triumph in the conflict.
Russia has failed to occupy Ukraine, and the country remains unbroken. Despite the aggression, Ukraine has preserved its independence, freedom, and geopolitical course. Its flag remains intact, the nation unchanged, a clear victory that Ukrainians can be proud of.
Zelensky believes Putin is trying to use the negotiation process to further Russia's offensive goals. The Ukrainian president says the Kremlin is effectively playing with the US, including President Donald Trump, to delay any real negotiations. According to Zelensky, Putin responds only to strengths, which is why he adopts a polite tone with the Americans while using it to stall and manipulate the process for his own advantage. Meanwhile, Moscow continues to stick to its hardline demands in negotiations, deliberately showing the process and seeking to buy time. The Kremlin shows no signs of readiness for meaningful peace talks and is likely preparing for a prolonged war against Ukraine, according to analysts at the Institute for the Study of War. Significant disagreements persist in the Kremlin's peace talks. Moscow insists on the legal recognition of annexed Ukrainian territories and wants Kyiv to abandon its NATO aspirations, effectively blocking any concessions. Meanwhile, political strategists close to the United Russia Party indicate that the military issue is being prepared as a central theme for the State Duma election campaign in December this year. The Kremlin does not expect a quick end to the war and does not plan to change its strategy even if political shifts occur. Analysts note that the war is now fully integrated into the Kremlin's election strategy, with support for candidates holding hardline pro-war positions. This move suggests that Moscow intends to continue military operations at least until autumn and likely even longer. The Kremlin's actions are aimed at slowing down negotiations, buying time and improving its positions on the battlefield, while maintaining the appearance of active dialogue. Talks are treated as a tool to control developments and prevent outcomes unfavorable to Russia. One example of this strategy is delaying the delivery of US Tomahawks to Ukraine, while diplomatic meetings are ongoing. Delaying a peace agreement also allows Moscow to keep the option of resuming military operations from stronger positions. Analysts at the Institute for the Study of War conclude that Russia is effectively trying to buy time to advance on the front lines and implement its military plans. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has sent an open letter to President Zelensky, accusing him of taking actions contrary to Hungary's interests. On the morning of February 26, Orban posted on X that over the past 4 years, Ukraine has allegedly failed to respect the position of Hungary's sovereign government and its people regarding the war with Russia. Hungarian Prime Minister went further in his criticism of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, accusing him of trying for 4 years to drag Hungary into war against Russia. Orban also claimed that Zelensky, Brussels and Hungary's opposition are coordinating efforts to bring a pro-Ukraine government to power in Budapest. In addition, Orban raised concerns over the Druzhba oil pipeline, which he described as a critical to Hungary's energy security. He accused Zelensky of taking steps that effectively block the pipeline, framing the issue as a direct threat to Hungary's national interests.
In recent days, you've blocked the Friendship oil pipeline, which is critical to Hungary's energy supply. Your actions are against Hungary's interests and endanger the secure and affordable energy supply of Hungarian families. I therefore call on you to change your anti-Hungarian policy. We, the Hungarian people, are not responsible for the situation in which Ukraine finds itself. We sympathize with the Ukrainian people, but we do not wish to participate in the war. We do not want to finance the war effort, and we do not want to pay more for energy. I urge you to immediately reopen the Friendship oil pipeline and refrain from any further attacks on Hungary's energy security. More respect for Hungary.
Hungary has blocked a 90 billion euros EU loan package for Ukraine after refusing to support one of 3 documents approved by the European Parliament. The move has raised concerns within the European Union about how far pressure on Viktor Orban should go during the election campaign, with some fearing it could be counterproductive. On February 25th, Orban also issued statements warning of an alleged Ukrainian threat to Hungary's energy system and announced plans to deploy military forces to protect critical energy infrastructure. At the same time, EU officials are exploring ways to allow Orban to save face ahead of the elections, potentially enabling him to lift the blockade on funding for Ukraine without triggering a full-scale legal confrontation with Budapest. 3 unnamed EU diplomats told Politico that the goal is to avoid escalating the dispute while keeping financial support for Kyiv on track. In Brussels, officials are weighing options that would allow Hungarian Prime Minister to frame a potential compromise as a political win at home. One scenario under discussion involves assurances related to the Druzhba oil pipeline, which carries Russian crude to Eastern Europe and remains critical to Hungary's energy supply. At the same time, the European Union finds itself in a difficult position. Ukraine is approaching a serious financial crunch, while Brussels is reluctant to hand Orban a political victory ahead of elections. EU officials warned that without a breakthrough, Ukraine could run out of funds as early as April, the same month Hungarian voters head to the polls. Orban's move has sparked widespread frustration across the EU. Earlier this week, European Council President Antonio Costa warned that Hungary's actions violate the EU principle of sincere cooperation. The message was widely seen as a signal that legal consequences could follow, including the possible launch of Article 7 proceedings that would strip Budapest of its voting rights. However, most EU diplomats appear reluctant to pursue a legal route, arguing it would be also too slow and politically risky. Instead, the focus has shifted toward political pressure and persuasion aimed at convincing Hungary to lift its veto. One proposed solution involves drafting a political document offering assurances on the future of oil supplies via the Druzhba pipeline, giving Orban room to claim a domestic success. The officials note that a similar workaround was used in the past when leaders found a way to overcome Slovakia's resistance to phasing out Russian gas supplies. Ukraine has emerged as one of the countries most affected by the new tariffs introduced by the administration of Donald Trump. Following the increase in EU tariff rates on February 24th, Ukrainian exports now face some of the heaviest trade restrictions in the region, according to a February report by the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Ukraine's average EU import tariff has now risen to 20.3%, up from the 16.6% previously. Across the countries where the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development operates, spanning Central and Eastern Europe, Central Asia and parts of the Mediterranean, the average US tariff increased from 14.6% to 15%. However, 29 countries in the region face even higher rates. Ukraine ranks among the 5 countries with the sharpest increase in tariff pressure alongside Armenia, Egypt, Kenya and Kosovo. By contrast, several states saw their tariff burden fall significantly. Duties for Bosnia and Herzegovina and Serbia dropped by 12 percentage points, Moldova by 9 and Tunisia by 8, largely due to the replacement of earliest country-specific tariffs with a flat rate. Ukrainian exports to the United States totaled $874 million in 2024, led by pig iron and steel pipes. Ukraine exports more than 600 products categories to the US, with 65 of them exceeding $1 million in value. Meanwhile, imports from the United States into Ukraine remain far higher, reaching $3.4 million. The tariff overhaul follows a ruling by the US Supreme Court which curtailed the use of emergency powers to impose the so-called reciprocal tariffs. In response, Trump announced a new global tariff of 10% while signaling it could be later raised to 15%. That's all for today. Thank you for watching and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your comments below.